What up, beautiful people? This is me, the Infinity Midwife, coming to you once again. This time I'm on my balcony or my terrace. I don't know how to say that in English, but hey, I'm standing outside, right outside of my house, beautiful greenery in the back scene. So it is what it is. Y'all, hope y'all taking care of yourselves, taking care of your mind, your heart, and your whole beautiful being. So I'm coming to you with another message because I felt like it was necessary that I do share. Okay, don't mind the winds. It's the winds. The winds are with me. So yes, I have to share this message. I have to share this message because it's important that it comes out. It's a piece of art that I'm here to share with you guys. And before I share this beautiful piece of art with you guys, it's just a little, disclaimer out there. This poetry may be a little triggering. So again, I'm just putting it a little disclosure or a little, disclaimer. It could be triggering to you, to some of y'all who have certain beliefs, but I'm not here to reassure you in your beliefs. If anything, I'm probably here to start questioning your beliefs. I constantly question my beliefs in order to grow, in order to evolve, and hopefully, I can bring a little bit of light where there's darkness, okay? So, that being said, let's go right into the poetry that I have for you guys. Okay. So like I said, it's a bit heavy, but bear with me. It's nothing that will kill you. If anything, it will help you question yourself. I will also lead afterwards with a little bit of, not explanation, but just having a little conversation with you guys, if y'all are open to that. So without further ado, let's go, okay? It never happened how they be storytelling. Check your story. Lies laying deep, then on the surface. Hundreds of years they be saying, captive on chains, physically slaves on those cotton fields. But check again. This time, remove those hurt feelings. How can we easily trust their narrative that the transatlantic slave trade lasted almost half a century? Can you really? Close your eyes for a minute. Ease your mind while you're at it. You know how long lasts 100 years? Let's stroll down memory lane and make use of common sense and logic. They say they locked us in chains and thrown on boats, packed like rats and sold overseas to the best owner, crook. Let's not dwell there. Let's go even deeper and explore more in theory. When we compare and share timelines of what they say had happened on the continent versus what was really going on the European land, question the timelines, similarities or discrepancies. What is needed to uphold that sort of business versus what resources were used, if any. Europeans had under the belt summoning of illusions, playing magic through changing, creating politics, having rewritten storylines so that you always feel the misery, always in fear that is lingering, always in fear that a lingering threat of what they did, of what they say they did, will come back to hunt me. With famous Hollywood blockbusters, from Django to 12 Years a Slave, every movie to reinforce the illusion that they held over our ancestry. But when I look to you and me, and how greatness pours out so easily, I doubt the very story that held us down for 400 years. Some were great illusionists that convinced the chess masters of our communities to hold that shit down for a parcel of fame and being held up like a celebrity. His story in the making, television propagated it with actors, producers, produced the greatest lie ever told, that they held captive in Africa 400 plus. But what they really did is plant the seed in your subconscious through storytelling. And every February, you gather to reinforce of a culture that was diluted by great orators and public speakers. That's what frats and Ivy Leagues recruit the best to be on TV, to keep the souls in bondage to this lie that keeps your mind chained in deceit. They succeeded, or not, in keeping the lie alive for only less than 100 years since the apparition of television. Artifacts rearranged that tells the story of a bigger lie, exported in museums, taking more of your money, original resources portrayed, a false sense of belonging. No facts to be sustained, only logic can push the falter. The structures that painted a fake picture of a colonizer, making use of our own magic to keep us in boxes, having us weeping. Every time we hear Black history, blacks in his story were depicted as slaves. But can someone use common sense to analyze the depth of these fallacies? How easy we connect to emotions of shame and guilt when we're victimized with storylines that doesn't match our evolutionary cellular composition. Emotionally, we've trapped our minds to believe a demise that was forced on our psyche. So what do you choose to embody? Let go of a narrative that makes the boogeyman a bigger villain, thus giving it less power by terminating our own victim mentality, stepping into our great aim, releasing chains of mental slavery. Or you choose to hold on to a lie that traps you in fear, paralyzing your every ambition, choosing to quiet your own very essence by allowing an invisible threat to hurt you, creating sturdy defeated chains, trap you in mental slavery infinitely. If you cannot fathom the multi-layers of this ignominious crime of convincing you, your parents, and your great-great-parents that they were captives and never native to this land, forgive yourself and let go of all emotions that keep you bound in time. For reassurance, for inferiority complex, for social norms, a mask of well-blended nonsense, for secretive ties, holding truth with blood on your hands. Free yourself from a story that doesn't fit your inheritance, nor your legacy. Build a story that fit the shoe of a people that generated life over lands and seas, always bridging life and death, never corrupting the minds of the misaligned, always thrive to unbound the chains of your mind, always thrive to rewrite your narrative and heal your ancestral lineage. Tell them how free they've always been. Tell them how free they've always been. Just needed to drop the heavy burdens of the transatlantic slave trade that was never part of your DNA to carry. A spell that wanted to keep us bound to exploitations of our minds, our energy. Go ahead and breathe. Flush history that no longer serves your ascension. You are, were, and always be free. Okay, I'm shaking up. I'm sturdy. I'm shaking it up. I'm shaking it up. I'm shaking it up, you guys, because it needs to be said, okay? When we are looking at our story, our personal story, now this ties into the collective shadow right here, right now, is what I'm going to talk about. When we talk about the stories that we've been through, when we talk about the stories that we've been through as children growing up, as a group of people evolving, as a nation, as a collective of minds evolving, we have to come to the realization that there are certain stories that impede the evolution of our minds, of our hearts, of our individuality, of our communities, and of our collective as a whole. But we need to let go. We need to start questioning how true the story holds truth for me. If it's a story, and I know a lot of people want to hold on to that story because it justifies so much. It justifies the hurt. It justifies the lack of motivation. It justifies the victimhood. It justifies so many things that we want to hold on to. But when we look at the bigger picture, who were the initiator, or who were at the origin of the story being told? Whoever controlled a narrative of the story can be retold. And I feel like this is the best time to do it. We have to start shattering stories that no longer serves us. Yes, stories is what they say they kept in books for us to keep the inheritance and to transfer it to future generations. But what I say to you is use your common sense. Your mind is your greatest liberator. Your heart, how you feel, is your greatest liberator. Your body as a whole is your greatest liberator. You just have to start trusting it, because when you do, you will realize by using your common sense and logic that the story that they want to hold up so much, that we've been put in captivity for 400 years, is a fallacy. Is a fallacy, you guys. What I'm saying, y'all need to start thinking with logic. And I don't even want to go into the timelines of the dates. If you want to do that, do that. But I'm here to tell you, it's time for you to drop the burdens of some stories that no longer fits you as the evolving being that you are. You may be not your color. You may be not your race. You may be not your name. You may be more than that, is what I'm trying to say. So with that being said, I feel like the same would hold truth to a story being told to us when we were kids, right? Adults will tell you a story. As a child, you will listen and you will bring truth to it. Until you start becoming a little older, you start using your logic, then you realize that Santa Claus does not really exist, or the story behind Valentine's Day is one of a massacre. Like, you will start, because we are in this age of information, and I feel like you have the same way you let go of some narratives that, some beliefs that you had when you were young, you let those stories go because it was not part of, your truth, you being an adult, an evolving adult. So I feel like the same rings truth as a collective of people, especially Black people, okay? I want to say this because I feel like it's impeding on our evolution as a people, on an individual and on a collective. And I feel like that's one of the biggest shadow that we are still carrying on to this day, is holding on to a story that was never told by us. A story that kept our mind in slavery. Why? Because it's the biggest story that promotes the biggest fear ever. When you hear the story of slavery that held our ancestors captive for 400 years, you have this fear creeping up in you that the boogeyman, however you want to call it, held your people captive. Not only your people, but the foremothers and the forefathers for 400 years. That's like, what, 7 generations? They want to convince us that. And when it's a story being told from a narrative that doesn't want you to succeed, obviously blockbuster movies are going to be produced every 2 years, 3 years. Obviously, there will be celebration around your story that, again, is not being told from your perspective. Okay? So whoever controls a narrative, whether it's a story that you grew up on about your own identity that was being repeated through your parents, through your environment, telling you, oh, you were like this, you were like that, you were like that. And then you believe it on the individual level that you are whatever people push upon you. You want to hold on to that. Well, then that's going to be the limit as far as you're going to want to evolve. But when you start letting those things go, when you start questioning those stories, those narratives on an individual level and on a collective level, you realize that those stories are more fear-based, induced, and limiting as well. And if we are not in a position to start opening up our minds to the possibilities that exist, we are going to stay limited in our evolution. Okay? And why I feel like slavery is one of the biggest lies ever told. Like, if you guys actually did go and do some timelines, okay? Like, Europe was never, like, if we go back, like, to the 1700s, to the 1500s, to the 14th, 1300th century, like, these people in Europe, they barely had it all together. They had wars, Judaism war. They had famine. They had plagues. I mean, they had all kinds of things, you know, making their resources shaky. So when you think of how was that even possible with their own storyline, like if you just do a comparative of their storyline, you realize that they not had the structure, the minds, and the resources to carry on a slave trade for 400 years. And it's not a slave trade of a small business. When you look at black people, when you look at the character, the personality, and the grandeur of our people, you want to put two and two together, and deep down within yourself, there is something hesitating as to how actually is that even true and real. Okay, it does not make any sense. And then when they talk about, you know, all nations came together and agreed upon they agreed upon for that slave. How come when you go in Japan, you will find more stories of black people being the originator of what's the warrior name here? I'm forgetting. The Japanese warriors, they have a name. I'm forgetting the name. So when you look at other people's stories, groups of people around the world, you will find that the slave trade that they're talking about was probably more minimal back then than what it is now. I'll say that again. If you look at the different narratives of how this agreement took place on this earth for 400 years, and you look at these different groups of people on the Asian continent, on the Australian continent, or however you want to look at it, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. But if you look at other narratives of how that slave trade affected all these other groups, you will find that in all these other groups, except in America, the slave trade was minimal to what it is today. I feel like we need to start... Oui, tu peux. So I think that we need to start to come into questioning those things, those narratives, okay? Damn, what's the name? Yeah, the samurai. Thank you. So when you go and look at the samurai in Japan, the originators of the samurai were black people. Like, when you look at the culture and the clothing and the language, you will find more similarities with all these other groups of people than with Europeans. Or even so, you will find that there were traces of Moors in Europe at the beginning of that so-called slave trade, transatlantic slave trade, that the Moors initiated that. Again, that's even to be discussed and analyzed, because when we look at it from a different perspective, from my perspective, it feels like as the moment television was created, or as the moment as there was this propaganda notion that the news needed to be handled a certain way, that books needed to be produced a certain way, that as soon as you start seeing certain politics taking place on certain continents, you realize that there was the beginning of propaganda. Maybe before, prior television, but there was a beginning of propaganda being installed. Because Black people traveled the world prior to slavery. I mean, we had our boats, we had our structures. Why do we? So you see, when you look at that narrative again, I'm going to cut it off here. When you look at that narrative again, you find that there's more power giving to these people in terms of resources, infrastructures, materials, like everything. They had the know-how and the knowledge, when in fact, they did not. We want to push so much of how Christopher Columbus came to this continent and discovered it. How true? How much lies is being portrayed and propagated because the narrative is held upon a certain type of people or a certain group or a certain elitists? How true does that ring into your heart? Can you sit down and question that? We traveled the world. We've not even conquered. We were one big continent before. And as much as the land started separating, we started migrating in different places. And there was magic on all these different lands. We are not original of just Africa. We are original of the fucking planet. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are original of the fucking earth. And we need to stop limiting ourselves by calling, African Canadians, African Americans, African this, African... No. For instance, I'm born on this land, this Quebec land, Montreal land. Well, guess what? I have ancestral lineage on this land because I'm born on this land. There is no limitation to the type of ancestral lineage compared to the one in Africa. There's none. Wherever you are born on this plane, you have access, equal access to those ones claiming that they've been here before you or whatever have you. You have equal access to the ancestral lineage on this land because you are born on this land. Wherever you are. So yes, there are levels to this. Yes, there are levels to, if you, people grew up on a land, they cultivated that land, there was traditions and cultures, but we are coming to a realization that us as a people, I'm even going to cross the line and say people as human people, okay? Not necessarily Blacks, but human people. Or, Black, Indigenous, or whatever you feel speaks to you. Because at this point, it's not even about Black and white. And I feel like, again, the narrative of the transatlantic slavery trade brings that separation between the white folks and the Black folks, white people and Black people, the Caucasian people and the Black original or Black Asian or however you want to call it. At this point, I feel like this is, again, the narrative is being told for many, many, many repercussions. One, it puts fear into your psyche, into your mind, that they did it once, they can do it again. but they're actually doing it right now in this real-time dimension, in this 2022 version of life. There's actually more slavery happening right now than what they say it was 400 years ago. Okay? So yes, one of the repercussions is taming your mind, right? Instilling fear in your mind, knowing that if they did it once, they can do it again, which is just conditioning you to be a slave in the actual times of today. Number 2, repercussion, bringing more separation between people, right? They did this to my people. They did this to my people. No, they're doing it right now because you're holding on to that truth. Shit. People are not going to like this video, but shit, I'm going to say it anyway. And if we tap into our ancestral lineage, we will find that our lineage is not bound by color, by race, by culture, by whatever have you. Those trees are my ancestors. This water is my ancestor. This air that I breathe is my ancestor. It's not bound by a race, a color, a language, or anything of that sort. It's an energy, it's a vibration. So when you transcend those concepts, those stories, those narratives, you realize that the world is at your feet and that you're no longer bound by wanting to be or, you know, wanting to work with a people or not or whatever have you. We're here to ascend into our own individual power, but we need to let go of some of the narratives that no longer serves our purpose. Yo, on that note, you guys, I did talk a lot. I hope you enjoyed my poetry. That was a little bit of collective shadow being shared as well. So on that note, take care of your mind, your hearts, and your whole being on this journey.